So I have prepared information for today in an organized format that I will give to you now. Doesn't always happen. And I always have the information. Yeah, enjoy, please. Please enjoy. Okay, so wait, I said too fast. So we're going to talk about naturing and nurturing, thinking of ourselves as instruments of consciousness, and what does that mean? So we'll look at some preliminary genetic studies that support the role of nature in this, and look at practices that support the role of nurture. Some key terms. I want you to just look at this and then notice how you respond and or react to each term. Because something I am learning in this field is that the words you choose matter a lot when you are learning to speak post-materialism fluently, which I do not believe I am quite fluent yet, but I am aspiring. And so I believe these are all things that could be used interchangeably and for which people will have different reactions. So transcendent consciousness, non-ordinary consciousness, and beyond brain consciousness. So this one I think is the most direct and plain. Awareness that suggests their consciousness is not confined to neurons. So we'll maybe circle back to thoughts on those if we have time. Gotta get to the field trip. Okay, and then I wanted to speak to the dichotomy here. So I set one up, right? Nature versus nurture. What do we know about binaries? They're stupid. I know, but I have to teach this. And frameworks are useful. So I'm acknowledging that the setup of the structure in and of itself is fundamentally flawed. However, for the purposes of the next 20 minutes, we're going to just go with this, okay? And so when looking at genetics, they have begun to do screens of looking at the role of if there's a genetic component for, on this slide I chose beyond brain consciousness. And so if you guys want, I always finish the slides right before class because I have a break. So they're not on Canvas yet, but they will be. And all of these are hyperlinks to the study. So if you see one that you're interested in, they're all linked there. I also linked a bunch of stuff in, did anybody look at it even? You did? Yay. See how good that works though? You see how when I don't give you homework, the majority of you still did it? Or maybe you're lying, but I don't think you would lie to me because what's the point? Right? I'm saying that for the camera. Look at that. Everyone did their homework even though I didn't say, you have to do your homework. I don't know. Probably like 12 people if I'm lucky. So in this one, the design is exome sequencing is basically where they sequence the entire genome. And then they compare the genome sequencing from self-identified psychics and matched non-psychic controls. So matched by age, gender, socioeconomic status, I don't remember, read the paper, they match all these things. That's kind of standard psychological practice to always have matched controls. And I also wanted to say that when they say self-identified psychics, it wasn't like they could just come in and say, I'm a psychic. They had to do tests to prove the veracity of their claims, right? So they would have them perform their psychic abilities, and if they did enough veridical, like successful tests, then they would say, okay, you can go into the you are psychic group. And so the goal of this is to look for genetic differences that might correlate with psychic traits. So again, we can't ever say causation, but correlation in this case. This is a lot of text, but I wanted to show you that they had generally good methods. So they started with 3,000 people, which for psychological research is a pretty decent sample size. Via online surveys where they either claimed they or their family members were psychic. And then I think this part is important. So there are a lot of folks in the space studying the relationship between psychic, medium, various, the word I'm most comfortable with is non-local abilities, and mental health. So anybody who had an indication of psychosis, delusion, etc., were excluded from the study. And there's also other studies demonstrating that those do not correlate with any statistical significance. So folks who are psychic do not have higher than average population likelihood to be delusional or psychotic. And so they did all these screens, and in the end, as you might imagine, it's pretty hard to find people who can prove they're psychic. So out of the 3,000 that they screened, they only got 13 that passed all of the tests. So could prove it, didn't have any of these other symptoms, and then they paired them with age, sex, ethnicity, income matched controls, and did DNA screening. And then did the bioinformatics to look at the genetic differences, finding that they looked at one that focused on protein coding. How much biology do we have in here? DNA makes RNA makes protein? Okay, yes. So coding stands for the DNA that is 1 to 2% of the entire genome that codes proteins. The rest of it, as I've maybe mentioned before, scientists call junk. Pausing for everybody to go, oh. There, thanks. And so that is intron or potential DNA. Basically, because I am trained as a biologist, I do not think that biology makes mistakes. I don't believe that 98% of what we came with is junk. I think that's ridiculous. Okay, so that was the methods, and then the findings was that in the protein coding sequences, they did not see any difference between psychic, non-psychic. However, in the introns, the non-coding regions, they found a specific gene chromosome region that had a difference in 7 out of 9 controls and was absent from everyone in the psychic group. You with me? Go ahead.
So, thinking about this in like a mechanical way, it's basically like someone put an inhibitor to make us not psychic.
That is what it would suggest.
Okay.
Someone.
Why did they do that?
I don't know, you guys write in your reviews that you want the next class and maybe I'll tell you. I don't actually know the answer, that was a joke. Okay. So this is another one. Now we're looking at mediumship. And this is out of a group. So as I mentioned, I've taken high-level courses on this. The guy's name is Moriera. He's a really well-known, highly followed Brazilian scientist who runs an entire research lab that somehow in Brazil they were able to get money to do this. I think it's largely a cultural difference because it's what mediums are widely accepted as part of Brazilian culture, whereas here they would be like, why are you going to study that? So in this case, they had 54 recognized mediums with greater than 10 years of validated experience. Does everyone know what a medium is? Good thing I checked that. You guys gotta scrunch up your faces more when I don't know what I'm saying. It's okay, I still got it. So mediums are folks that can communicate or gather accurate information about the deceased. So if I am talking to Wes, the way they do this, actually I'll set it up for the way they do it in controlled studies. So I would be talking to Wes to get information about, Kean, do you know anyone who's died?
I mean, kind of, yeah.
Well, somebody, let's pretend you know someone.
Oh, I did, yeah.
Yeah, so somebody close to you has died, but I'm not talking to you, I'm talking to Wes, trying to get information about the deceased person of yours, right? So now I'm gonna, as the medium, I'm gonna say, okay, I wanna know about Wes's Kean's grandma. I'm gonna get that information, give it to Wes, then Wes will go talk to Kean. Kean's in a totally different room, right? So they're not doing it off of reading like the person, for example, it's a layer removed. So in this case, Wes would be kind of the experimenter, saying, okay, tell me what information you're getting, then you'd go validate. So that's generally how they test this in laboratory settings. So in this case, they had these recognized mediums who have lots of experience, and then the first degree relatives. So the idea there is to have them be genetically similar, but without the mediumistic capacity. Is everybody with me now? Okay. And this one, again, full exome sequencing. And so here they see over 15,000 variants that were seen only in mediums. that potentially affected 7,000 genes. I think that some of this statistical significance is due to the fact that here they could have 54 compared to only 13. You know, so part of what I'm trying to convey here is how much better it could be had we more studies, right? So part of the reason you're able to get more relevance when you have a larger sample size. And they found 33 genes that were altered in greater than a third of the mediums and none of the relatives. So you might say, well, that's not 100%. However, if that were a disease state, the CDC would be all over it, right? If we had 33% of people with some disease, just for context. And of those genes that were different, they had overrepresentation in immune and inflammatory signaling, basically in a positive way. I'm not gonna get too much into the ZAP70 translocation, this is more detailed than what you need. But essentially, they found differences and they were toward health. Let's put it that way to be simple about it.
The altered genes, altered from what and when,
Yeah.
what does that mean?
So in direct comparison to what we would call wild type. So in the sciences, when they do genetic screenings, they take the majority and say this is the wild type. So I used to work with fruit flies. So the wild type fruit fly, that's the one that has the genome that came normal. Then you, put it in a test tube and let it live with the alcohol cotton ball in there for a while, you take it out, you screen it again.
But so the genes are altered within the lifetime.
But generally your gene sequence does not change in your lifetime, but the expression of genes changes in your lifetime.
Okay.
And so in this case, my biological expertise would lead me to believe these people were born with these genetic differences.
Okay, that's exactly what I was
Yeah.
asking.
Okay, so there's a few more of these studies, but in the interest of getting us to the planetarium, I'm going to stop there and just say preliminary studies suggest that nature, genetic differences may play a role. Binaries are bullshit, but let's continue. Now, thinking about nurturing. So if we are thinking of ourselves now as instruments of consciousness, are there ways to nurture more frequent, vivid experiences of beyond brain consciousness? So there are also multiple of these. I'm going to go through one that I think is kind of the best based on sample size and the way they did recruitment and stuff, but you can find a couple more of these. And a reminder, the reason I believe there are probably only 4 of these is because who's going to pay for it? Most of these are done by scientists that I have had the great honor to meet, and they are doing them out of their own pocket. These are not funded by the NIH or funded by big pharma, as many studies are. Okay, so in this one, they had over 1,000 meditators from 66 different countries, and gender split, you can see there. Educational level skewed high. As you might imagine, you're going to get more of that type of archetype of person who's signing up for a research study. They had all different types of meditation techniques. This is all broken down more in the paper, but basically to say there wasn't one technique that everybody did mantra. There was a whole variety of practices. And these ranged all the way from beginning to expert. So most already had some meditation practice, but there could have been people in the study who'd only been practicing for a couple months, and other people who've got their, thousands of hours, month level stuff going on. And now I pulled screenshots from my own text because I got tired of copying and pasting everything into the slides. It's a lot, so I'm sorry these are ugly. I was also running out of time. I was like, I gotta go. Okay, so basically the way they assessed this was there's a questionnaire called the Mystical Experience Questionnaire that has all of these subscales. And many people experience some subdomain at least a few times, some saying many times or almost always. And so some of the phenomena they found are telepathy or mind-to-mind communication, 56% of participants reported clairvoyance or telepathy at least once, with 30% reporting these experiences many times or almost always. These experiences were often rated as meaningful or salient, an average importance of 4 on a 5-point scale. Whatever, I don't know. I thought that part was kind of funny. Other kind of less common, but still interesting. And also I want to say, for those of you that are thinking like 30% is low for people to be reporting clairvoyance or telepathy almost always, reminder that if there were a disease that was affecting 30% of the population, the CDC would be flipping out.
What's the range of like considered telepathy?
Yeah, so in the paper, they define it as knowing, like direct mind-to-mind communication, knowing what someone else is thinking,
Okay.
hearing other people's thought forms. So some other cool ones, experiences like external physical phenomenon, apparently without physical cause, were less common, but still reported at about 30%. Again, they were rated these experiences as being very meaningful. Alterations in sense of time, space, boundary dissolution. Synchronistic experiences were especially prevalent. So do you know what that word means?
It's like manifesting kind of.
Kind of, or the ability to, I think of it as like breadcrumbs of the universe. So you just think about something and then it appears, or you've had a thought and then and so kind of there becomes a flow of breadcrumbs to be followed. So there's a date on that. I'm going to keep it moving so we're not late. John, I'm doing it. Okay.
This is qualitative comments on ways people are experiencing, on ways meditators are experiencing.
Yes, so they're qualitative and they are, in this case, it is self-reported, right? Because there is as yet no testable way to prove I am, actually that's not true. There are testable ways to prove I am hearing your thoughts, and that research is being done and proven, but for the funding of this project, they couldn't do that. But if you're interested in that, Denise Hennessy Powell, Marjorie Willicott, look it up. Okay. And so most of these occurred while meditating alone, though some happen outside of the formal practice. So most of what they're reporting is like happening while they're meditating, but some happened outside of while they were practicing. I'm very interested in the parts about how people tend to see these as really meaningful, and it changes their health and well-being understanding. So that is a big part of why I am interested in this, because sure, you can understand someone's thought form, that's kind of a cool party trick, but the fact that that then has health implications for these people, their worldviews change, their health and well-being metrics afterwards change, to me is a very interesting and important outcome to consider for health. And then I also want to acknowledge some limitations and cautions. So it was self-selected, it was a non-random sample. However, that is pretty standard in psychology research. Most psychology studies done in CU are just undergraduate students signing up for the study. That's like common practice. So yes, it's a limitation, but also too many things is that same limitation. Self-report design, so you can't draw causal interference here, but they didn't try to. They didn't say that anywhere in the paper, they just made it clear we're just looking at what people say. Again, lack of independent verification, it's difficult to do that for these things, but possible. And then they also talk about how people's interpretations of their own experience could be influenced by their cultural, spiritual, or belief frameworks. Okay. John, I'm gonna go over by like 2 minutes.
Go.
Okay.
You got it.
So this is another one. I'm gonna go really fast. Basically, they compared meditation to exercise. They said the meditation group had increases in mindfulness, connectedness, openness, and reported more paranormal experiences and beliefs over time compared to the exercise control group. And they attempted in this study to test the psi effects, basically ability to control random number generators. That did not change. Okay. Oh, this is hard. I'm gonna skip it, I guess. Do it? Okay.
Don't stop.
Don't stop. Okay, so this is something that began in the 1900s, and the paper is here, but this became common scientific practice around that time, and it's referred to as methodological exclusion of the transcendent. And the claim is that we must ignore transcendent realities, restricting explanations to biological and psychological factors, because inclusion of the transcendent is anti-scientific. So there are problems with this. So this excludes any data that doesn't fit neatly into materialism. It will tend to ignore veridical anomalies, veridical meaning truthful and capable of being validated. Is with me still? Okay. And one thing that I personally am concerned with, and this is again from the work of Moreira, the Brazilian doctor I was mentioning earlier, but it risks potentially reducing scientific relevance because it risks making psychology seem irrelevant for people who have had these types of lived spiritual experiences. And so we don't, if we don't want our field to go extinct, we have to adapt. And so he proposes the alternative of agnosticism. So instead of excluding, hold open the transcendent as a possible explanatory factor. He calls for paradigm pluralism. And so you guys have probably heard me talk about pluralism before, but this is the idea that we have to allow many different explanations to potentially be true, rather than fundamentally saying, nope, can't be that. And there were, at the same time as Flournoy in the 1900s and shortly after, William James and Frederick Myers were other kind of competing psychologists saying, no, we should include this in science. And so now we're kind of trying to bring that back to the forefront and saying, yes, we should take anomalous phenomena seriously and at least not dismiss them right offhand. I am gonna skip this part and talk about it while we walk. And I'll walk backwards. Yeah.
On your right.
And what I'll say is this last slide, which is that the most advanced technology you will ever create or discover is not made of silicone. It is organic, and it already exists, and it is. The end.